What if I told you that in ancient Ireland, the most intimate gesture you could offer someone wasn't a kiss, a handshake, or even a hug? It was putting your lips on another person's nipple, not in the way you might be thinking, but as a public promise of obedience and protection so serious that refusing could insult a king and accepting could seal your fate. And the wild part? It's not just a pub joke. It comes from real traditions and legends that go back centuries. Imagine this. The year is somewhere in the early medieval centuries. The wind off the Atlantic feels like it could flay skin, and you've been captured by a group of strangers who speak your tongue but live by laws older than memory. You're St. Patrick, a man who has crossed seas and converted kings, and yet in your own confessio you write about this moment. You're offered safe passage on a boat, but the price isn't gold or a promise of service. It's that you suck the breast of your captor. You refuse, maybe out of pride, maybe out of discomfort, and you record it not as a joke, but as an act loaded with meaning. To us, it sounds bizarre. To them, it was a ritual contract, a symbolic way of saying, I belong to you, you are my protector. That's not just in Patrick's words. It's echoed in the archaeology, in the BogBodies pulled from Ireland's wetlands. Men like Old Croghan Man, preserved for over 2,000 years with their nipples deliberately cut away. Scholars like Eamonn Kelly from the National Museum of Ireland argue this wasn't random mutilation, it was ritual dethronement. A king's nipples were sacred. They symbolized his right to rule. Subjects would seal their loyalty by literally placing their lips to them, an act as public as kneeling before a throne. Cut the nipples, and the man could never again receive that symbolic pledge. Think about how deeply that imagery had to be rooted in their worldview for it to show up in both oral histories and the remains of the dead. But here's where the story turns. The gesture didn't only exist between rulers and subjects. Some historians and folklorists believe the practice, called SughaimSínne in later interpretations, also worked as a sign of welcome, reconciliation, or protection, sometimes even between people of equal standing. A mother might do it to her grown son before he left for war, not as an erotic act, but as a blessing, a transfer of life force, an unspoken promise that he was still tethered to home. A chieftain might receive it from a former enemy as a seal on a fragile peace. And in the old sagas, yes, sometimes satirical, sometimes symbolic, you find exaggerated scenes of warriors bending to the nipple of a rival as a way of saying, I yield, but I also trust you not to kill me. Over time, as Christianity took firmer hold, the practice became something to mock, to dismiss as pagan nonsense or rural superstition, but the echoes stayed. Even Patrick's refusal in his own writing works as a subtle nod to the custom's cultural weight. He didn't explain it to his readers. He assumed they'd already understand. Now picture a coronation. On a hilltop, the grass wet with morning rain, banners snapping in the wind. A new king stands bare-chested before his people. And one by one, his nobles step forward, lips brushing against the skin over his heart. Not a private indulgence, but a public declaration that this man is bound to the land, and they are bound to him. And then picture the opposite. A failed king, stripped, humiliated, his nipples cut so that no one can ever again offer him loyalty in this way. That's why the BogBodies matter. They're frozen proof of this symbolism, their wounds telling a story the annals only hint at. The unsettling part is how normal this all was in its own time. We're quick to frame it as odd, even obscene, because our cultural lens is so different. But to them, it was as serious and sacred as swearing an oath on a holy book. And maybe if you squint at history the right way, you see how much sense it made. There's something primal about a gesture that puts your own body into the pledge, something impossible to fake, impossible to take back. You can write a contract and burn it. You can make a promise and break it. But to kneel, to lean in, to press your mouth to someone's flesh in front of your peers, that's a submission you can't easily undo. That's what makes this story so haunting even now, not because of the act itself, but because of the human truth inside it, that we have always sought physical rituals to make our loyalties real. That even the most powerful people needed their authority reaffirmed, not just with words, but with touch. That the loss of that ritual, whether through Christian disapproval, colonial ridicule, or the slow erosion of oral tradition, was also the loss of a language, a way of binding one person to another without ink or bloodshed. And so the nipple-sucking custom of ancient Ireland isn't just a strange footnote in history. It's a reminder that intimacy and authority once walked hand in hand, that the body itself could be a throne, and that sometimes the most unsettling truths are the ones that were never meant to survive the march of time.